My name is Eleanor Roberts, and at 58 years old, I've spent most of my life giving everything to those around me. My children, my friends, my family. A mother, a wife, a sister. I've worn many hats, always putting others before myself. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I was. It wasn't until now, when I was asked to become a nanny for my own grandchild, that I began to see just how much I had been taken for granted. I had spent my years raising my children, and now, as a grandmother, I was supposed to be living a life of rest, enjoying the fruits of my labor. But suddenly, it seemed like I was being asked to go back to a role I never fully agreed to. And this time, it wasn't just about taking care of a child. It was about a decision that would change everything. The phone call came early one morning, and I had a feeling that something wasn't right before I even answered. I'd been trying to avoid that nagging voice in the back of my mind, telling me I was slipping further into the role of a servant, always giving, never receiving. But it was my daughter, and when you have children, you answer the phone. "Hi, Mom." Lily's voice came through the line, warm but laced with something I couldn't quite place. "I need to talk to you about something." I sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. "What's going on?" "Well, you know that the baby's daycare is getting expensive," she began, and I could feel where this conversation was going. "And your son-in-law's job is up in the air right now? So we were thinking it would be really helpful if you could take care of Emma a couple of days a week." There was a long pause on my end of the line. I blinked, unsure of what she was saying. I had been retired for a few years now, living a life that was supposed to be mine. My own time, my own space. And suddenly, without asking, she was giving me a role I hadn't agreed to. "What, you want me to babysit?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. "Yes," Lily said, as though it was the most obvious thing in the world. "It'll be a big help, Mom. And Emma loves spending time with you. It won't be that hard. Really." I could feel the irritation bubbling up in me, but I held it back, pushing away the feelings of frustration. "I'm not sure that's something I can commit to right now, sweetie. I have my own things I want to do." "Well, I thought you might want to help out, especially since you're not doing much anyway." The words were casual, but the undertone hit me like a slap. The implication stung. I hadn't expected to feel like I was being pushed into something so quickly, with no discussion, no consideration for my feelings. Lily's voice continued to speak, but I couldn't hear the words anymore. All I could focus on was the unspoken assumption that because I was a grandmother, it was expected of me to drop everything and take on the role of full-time nanny. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. "Lily, I need to think about this. I don't want to feel like I'm being forced into something." There was a brief silence. "It's just for a few days a week, Mom. We really need this help. I don't know who else to turn to." The message was clear. It wasn't a request. It was an ultimatum. And suddenly, I realized that this wasn't just about babysitting Emma. It was about being pushed into a role I hadn't chosen. I was being expected to give up my time and my freedom without a second thought, without any consideration of what I wanted. I hung up the phone with a sense of unease settling over me. I loved Emma, of course, but I couldn't help feeling that I was being taken for granted. That once again, I was expected to sacrifice for others, to bend to the needs of the family without a second thought. But this time, I wouldn't let it slide. This time, I would stand my ground. I would not be forced into a role I didn't want, no matter how much they needed it. Sometimes, the lack of respect can come from the people closest to you. And while it may hurt, I realized that I couldn't let their expectations dictate who I was. I had given enough, and now it was time for me to choose respect over sacrifice. The moment I heard those words, my stomach dropped. It was as if everything around me paused. The room, the air, even the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Lily's voice was calm, but the weight of her words crashed over me like a wave. She hadn't even asked, hadn't even given me a chance to respond. It was as if she had already made the decision for me. I was supposed to say yes. There was no room for a no. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, trying to steady myself. "What do you mean, no place for me?" "I'm your mother," I said, my voice a little sharper than I intended. But inside, I was shaking. What was I even being asked? Was this about helping my grandchild, or was it about me losing the last of my independence? She hesitated for a moment, then spoke again, softer this time, but no less firm. Mom, we need this. We've been struggling with the daycare bills, and you're the only one who can help. You're retired, you're at home, it's perfect. You'll have time to spend with Emma, and we won't have to pay anyone else. Her reasoning was clear, but so was my discomfort. The words came out before I had a chance to think through my response. But I'm not your nanny, Lily. I didn't sign up for that. I've spent years raising my children, and now I should be able to enjoy my time without being expected to pick up where I left off. Lily's face shifted, and there it was. The same look I'd seen in her eyes countless times growing up. That look that silently said, if you loved us, you'd do this. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be, she said, her voice suddenly distant. It's not that big of a deal, just a few days a week. We don't have anyone else, and we really need you. I could feel the pressure mounting. There it was again, the unspoken assumption that because I was family, I should drop everything and take on a role I had never agreed to. It wasn't just about Emma. It wasn't even about the money or the logistics of childcare. It was about me losing myself in the process. I can't just step into that role, Lily. I have my own life now. I have plans. I want to enjoy this time I've worked so hard to get to, I said, my voice rising. Her expression faltered, and then she said something that hit me harder than anything else. If you can't help us, then maybe we'll just have to figure it out on our own. We need someone who's willing to step up. I felt a wave of guilt, like a slap to the face. Willing, as if I wasn't doing enough already. As if my love for her, my support over the years, wasn't enough. The reality was clear. I was being pushed into a decision I wasn't ready for, and all the while, I had no voice in it. I loved Emma. I wanted to be part of her life. But this was something different. This wasn't a favor. This was an expectation. As I sat there, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me, I realized something profound. I had spent my entire life saying yes to the demands of family, giving until I was empty. And in doing so, I had forgotten to set any boundaries for myself. I had allowed myself to be taken for granted. I had to make a choice. Did I want to continue to be the person who sacrificed for everyone else? Or did I want to protect what was left of myself? The love I had for my family shouldn't mean I had to lose my dignity. Message. Family love should not come at the cost of our self-respect. It is possible to love deeply without losing ourselves in the process. The question I had to answer was whether I could set boundaries and still be loved. The night after our conversation hung heavy on me like an unspoken truth. I tossed and turned, the thoughts spinning in my mind, doubt, guilt, confusion. How had I allowed myself to get to this point? How had I, for so long, been willing to sacrifice everything, including my own desires and needs, just to keep the peace? It wasn't just about childcare. It wasn't even about the money. It was about boundaries, or more accurately, the lack of them. I had spent years playing the role of the selfless mother, the dutiful grandmother, always giving, always bending to the needs of my family. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. My own wants, my own space had been pushed aside to accommodate everyone else. And now, here I was, being asked to step back into the same role, this time as a nanny. I had to draw a line. I couldn't keep giving up pieces of myself to fulfill others' needs, not when I had worked so hard to reclaim my own life, my own independence. So, I made a decision that felt like a breath of fresh air. I was going to set boundaries. Strong, clear, unyielding boundaries. The next morning, I picked up the phone with a quiet resolve. I was ready to talk to Lily, to let her know that I loved her and wanted to help, but that I had limits. Lily, I began, my voice steady but firm, we need to talk about the childcare situation. I've been thinking a lot about it, and I've come to a conclusion. I can't do this. I can't keep stepping into this role without some understanding from you. I love Emma, and I want to be there for her. But I also have a life of my own. I need space, and I need my own time. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear Lily processing my words. What do you mean? She asked, her voice rising with confusion. Mom, you're retired. You're at home. What else do you have to do? I could feel the frustration rising in my chest, but I kept my voice calm. It's not about having things to do, Lily. It's about having a life that doesn't revolve around other people's needs. I spent years taking care of everyone else. I didn't get to do what I wanted. And now, I need to take care of myself too. Lily's response was swift and sharp. But you're the only one we can rely on, Mom. Why can't you just help us? Why is this such a big deal? I don't understand why you can't just do this for us. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I could hear the frustration, the confusion, and underneath it, the unspoken expectation that because I was her mother, I should give everything without question. But I wasn't just her mother. I was Eleanor, a person with desires, needs, and limits. I know you don't understand, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but I can't keep sacrificing myself. I'm not your nanny, I'm your mother, and I need you to respect my space just as I respect yours. There was silence on the other end, a tense, uncomfortable quiet. I just thought you'd want to help, Mom. We need you, she finally said, her voice soft and hurt. I do want to help, I said. But helping doesn't mean losing myself in the process. You have to understand that. The call ended, and I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone, wondering if I had made the right decision. But deep down, I knew I had. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't comfortable. But it was the only way to protect myself and the relationship with my daughter. Messaging setting boundaries isn't easy, but it's the only way to protect your sense of self. Sometimes, loving others means knowing when to say no and when to prioritize your own well-being. The moment I heard Lily's voice crack with frustration, something inside me shifted. It was like a tightening in my chest, a lump forming in my throat. I had heard her angry before, but this was different. This was personal. Mom, I just don't understand, she snapped, her words filled with hurt. You say you love Emma, but you won't help us. You're supposed to be there for her, for your own granddaughter. I could feel my heart racing, my pulse quickening as the words cut deep. I had never imagined that saying no would make me feel so small, so misunderstood. It wasn't just about Emma, it was about everything that had been building up. The years of giving, of putting my own desires aside for everyone else, and now, I was being told that my love for my granddaughter wasn't enough because I couldn't be what they wanted me to be. I do love her, Lily, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. But I also have my own life. I have my own needs. I can't just give up everything for you. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, and then a pause. When she spoke again, the words were clipped, icy. So, you're saying you won't help. That's your decision. I bit my lip, trying to calm the waves of anger that were beginning to rise in me. I didn't want to fight with her. Not like this. But it was hard. It was hard not to feel like I was being rejected. Like I wasn't enough because I couldn't bend to their demands. Yes, Lily? I said, my voice firm now. I'm saying that I can't help in the way you want me to. I'm not your nanny. I'm your mother. And I need you to understand that. Her response came like a punch to the gut. Then I guess that's it. If you're not going to be there for Emma, then I can't let you see her anymore. You're not part of our lives if you won't help us when we need you. The words hung in the air between us, suffocating. The weight of her ultimatum pressed down on me like a physical force. My eyes burned with unshed tears, but I refused to let them fall. Was this really happening? Was this what it had come to? I felt betrayed, my heart breaking with the realization that the love I had given, the years I had spent sacrificing my own desires for my family, didn't seem to matter anymore. My worth wasn't measured by how much I loved them, but by how much I was willing to give. How much I was willing to sacrifice. But as the anger and the hurt swirled inside me, another feeling started to rise, something quieter, more resolute. I had to protect myself. I had to stand firm in my decision, even if it meant hurting my daughter. It wasn't easy, and the pain of her words cut deeper than I had expected. But I knew I couldn't keep sacrificing my boundaries for the sake of their comfort. I ended the call, the silence ringing in my ears. My hands were shaking, but I didn't allow myself to give in to the pain. I couldn't. Message sometimes. Love means protecting yourself and standing firm in your values, even when it hurts the ones you love. It's not always easy to say no, but saying no can be the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for your relationships. After the phone call ended, the silence in my home was suffocating. The usual hum of life seemed absent, replaced by an oppressive stillness that weighed heavily on me. I sat there, in the very spot where I had spent countless hours raising my children, now feeling like an outsider in my own life. My thoughts spun, chasing after each other in circles. What had just happened? Had I done the right thing? Could I really stand firm against my daughter's demands? The question of boundaries had always felt like a distant concept to me. I had spent my life saying yes to my children, even when it meant putting my own desires and, well, being on the back burner. I had been the one they turned to, the one they could rely on without question. But now, for the first time, I was being asked to sacrifice for something that I didn't believe in. I thought about the years I had spent as a mother, how much I had given, how many pieces of myself I had willingly surrendered. But now something had shifted. The sacrifices were no longer making me feel loved or appreciated. Instead, they were suffocating me. I had given so much of myself that there was hardly anything left. It was time to accept the reality of the situation. I couldn't keep giving without losing myself entirely. As much as it hurt, I had to let go of the idea that my role as a mother and grandmother was to serve others without regard for my own needs. I loved my family, but I had spent too long thinking that love meant giving until I had nothing left. I couldn't continue to sacrifice my peace of mind for their convenience. I couldn't keep being pushed into a role I didn't choose. I made my decision. I was not going to be the nanny for my grandchildren. I would not be guilted into giving up my time, my freedom, my sense of self. I had to draw the line. I had to honor my own needs and respect the space I had fought so hard to create for myself. But as I took that step, I knew there would be consequences. I knew that my decision would not be met with understanding or appreciation. And I knew it would cause strain in my relationship with my daughter. The moment I told her I couldn't do it, I saw the hurt and frustration in her eyes, even though we were miles apart. "I'm sorry, Lily," I had said softly, "but I can't do this. I love Emma. I want to be a part of her life, but I can't be your nanny. I can't lose myself again." Her response was colder than I had anticipated. "I don't understand, Mom. If you loved us, you'd help. This is what family does. We help each other." The words cut deeper than I expected. If you loved us. Wasn't my love for them enough, without having to give up everything else in my life? I realized then that accepting the reality of the situation didn't mean compromising my values. It didn't mean accepting being treated as if I were invisible. Message: accepting reality is not about compromising what's right. Sometimes, standing firm in your truth means accepting that not everyone will agree with you. But it is the only way to protect your peace, your dignity, and your heart. By morning, the house had settled into a hush that felt almost ceremonial, as if the walls themselves were waiting for me to choose. The mug beside the sink was still half full of yesterday's coffee. A thin skin of milk curdled on top, evidence of how quickly an ordinary life can sour when a single conversation changes the air you breathe. I stood in the kitchen and let the quiet tell me the truth I had been dodging. I couldn't fix this by being smaller. I couldn't heal us by disappearing into a role I didn't choose. I called Lily before I could rehearse another apology, before I could talk myself into the soft lie of, "just for now." When she answered, the baby was cooing somewhere in the background. It made my throat ache. "I've thought about it," I said, steadying my voice on the counter's edge. "I can't be your full-time childcare. I love Emma. I will help when I can, on my terms, planned ahead, or we can discuss paid care if that's what you need. But I won't be a free nanny." Silence, the kind that crackles. Then the sharp inhale I know by heart. "So that's your decision," Lily said, not a question. "You'd rather protect your schedule than be here for your family." "This isn't about a schedule." I swallowed. "It's about my life. The one I put on hold for years and am finally learning to live." Her anger arrived like weather. "You're retired, Mom. You have time. We're drowning. And you're acting like you're busy." She almost laughed, a brittle sound. "Fine, if you can't be part of the solution. Don't be surprised when you're not part of the day, today." The words landed in my chest and stayed there. After we hung up, my phone lit with a message from her husband. Polite, pointed, "We'll make other arrangements. Please don't drop by unannounced. It confuses the routine." A family group chat that used to pulse with pictures of firsts, first roll, first tooth, went still. Acceptance, I realized, isn't a gentle bow. It's a gate that closes with an iron latch you can hear from every room. I walked anyway. Past the park where, last spring, I'd pushed Emma on the bucket swing until she squinted up at me like I'd hung the sun. Past the daycare with the laminated sign in the window. We're hiring. Because of course the world keeps turning, hiring, arranging. Surviving without the constellation we thought we were. I let the cold air scar the soft parts of me that wanted to bargain just one more compromise. Just one more. Yes, and maybe the picture would stop shaking. But love that requires your disappearance isn't love, it's appetite. Back home, I wrote it down in my own hand. Because ink has a way of making courage visible, I will not be a free nanny. I will love, I will show up, I will contribute, without vanishing. Then I taped the paper inside the pantry door, where grocery lists and birthdays live, a private creed among the cans and flour. The tension didn't lift. It thickened. Lily didn't call that night or the next. I made soup for one and set a second bowl anyway. A quiet, foolish place setting for hope. Grief came in honest waves, and I let it. You don't set a boundary to feel triumphant. You set it because the cost of erasing yourself has become too high to pay. Acceptance is not surrender. It's naming what is true, even when your voice shakes. I chose to live in the light of that truth, however stark it looked at first. Because accepting reality does not mean agreeing to what's wrong. It means refusing to be wrong about who you are. The distance didn't arrive with a slam. It arrived like fog, soft, inevitable, erasing edges I used to trust. After I drew my line, the house felt different. In the quiet, I could almost hear the thread between us thinning, the hum of a refrigerator, the tick of a clock, the echo of my own footsteps in rooms that had once been filled with pictures sent in real time. First steps, first spoonfuls, first raspberries blown into a bib. Now the family thread on my phone sat still, a bowl on the counter gone cold. At first, it was small. A photo I would normally get from Lily appeared instead on a cousin's social feed. A video of Emma clapping at music class came through a mutual friend, who added, "Thought you'd like to see." I told myself not to read into it, that people are busy, that silence is not a verdict. I brewed tea I didn't drink. I set a second mug I didn't fill. Then the calls began to stutter. "Hey mom, can't talk, diapers, meltdown, later." The later rarely came. When it did, it was clipped. A string of logistics without oxygen. "We've changed daycares. We're trying a new schedule. We'll see how it goes." Between her words I heard what wasn't being said. We would see. Not we, as in all of us. We as in the two adults who had decided the terms. I tried not to crowd her. I sent simple texts with buoyant ends, balloons, a yellow heart, because emojis feel like gentleness when language turns brittle. She answered with a thumbs up, a period where there used to be 3 exclamation marks. When I called, sometimes I was met by the hollow cheerfulness of voicemail. "Leave a message and we'll call you back." I spoke into that bright void like a person leaving breadcrumbs in a forest she wasn't sure she'd see again. The day it shifted from uneasy to undeniable. My name was missing from the daycare pickup list. No one told me, the receptionist did, kindly. With the apologetic look people use when they're carrying out someone else's boundary. I stood there with a bag of tiny rain boots I'd bought on sale and felt the room tilt. "We'll only release to authorized contacts," she said, and I nodded because this was no one's fault and also entirely ours. That night, Lily texted Mom. "We need some space to figure things out. Please stop dropping by. It unsettles Emma when routines change." I reread the message until the words bled at the edges. I typed erased, typed again. "I hear you. I'll wait for you to reach out." The dots of her reply flickered, then vanished. I had believed that love could weather the word no. I had believed that if I said it carefully enough, padded with "I love you and when I can, and tell me how to help," the blow would soften. But some refusals are too loud for the heart that wants what it wants. The ache broke over me in honest waves: anger, shame, the reflexive urge to fix this by capitulating. I could feel the old muscle memory. Just say yes and be let back in. I could also feel, just as vividly, the cost of that yes, the shrinking of my life back into a single room. The climax arrived not with a fight but with absence. Fewer calls, fewer pictures, holidays planned without a group text. I set my table for one and still wiped the other place setting, because grief is a choreography your hands remember before your head does. When the quiet got too loud, I walked. Past the park, past the nursery where hydrangea cuttings took root in patient rows, past the bookstore where the owner asked after Emma, and I told the truth. I didn't know how she was this week. Here is the twist no one advertises when they praise healthy boundaries. Sometimes they work. Not like a key opening a door, but like a scrubbing. Harsh. Necessary. Removing what can't stay. Lily began to sever the small threads, pickups, pop-ins, the casual texts that stitch a day together. And I faced the math I'd been avoiding. If I stayed the course, if I continued to honor the line I'd drawn, I might lose my place in the daily weather of their lives. I stood in that knowledge and did not move. Message respect and necessary limits can widen the space between people, and sometimes that space is the only path back to yourself. I am willing to face the distance. Because I will not abandon the one person I am, certain I can't live without the woman I am, intact. Freedom didn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrived like a window cracked open in a stuffy room. The first morning I left my phone face down on the table and let my coffee go hot on purpose. The silence wasn't a verdict anymore. It was permission. I stood at the sink, watched a ribbon of steam unravel into nothing, and understood that I could move through a day without waiting for instructions that never felt like choices. I started small, the way you test a healed bone. I walked to the Saturday market alone, fingers brushing the velvet of peaches, asking the woman with the sunburned nose how to coax basil to forgive me for overwatering it. I bought a bunch of zinnias so bright they felt like a dare, and I let myself bring them home, even though no one else would see them on my table. I opened the piano for the first time in years and found middle C like an old friend. The notes were clumsy, I was not. Guilt tried to follow, of course. It's built with good hearing. The first time I booked a matinee on a Tuesday, 1 ticket. Back row. I heard its whisper, you should be somewhere else. I ordered popcorn anyway, salted my own lap with it, and watched a film that made me laugh in the wrong places. Leaving the theater into bright afternoon felt like crossing a border without getting my passport stamped. No alarms. No questions. Just air. Then I did something bigger. I took the early train to the coast, a paper bag of oranges and a book in my purse. The water wore the sky's mood like a coat. Gray, then silver, then a blue so clear it looked like a decision. I walked the boardwalk, counted dogs, sat with a gull who eyed me, as though I belonged by virtue of stubbornness alone. On the ride home I wrote my name in the margin of my book, not as someone's mother or someone's emergency contact, but as the person in the seat, Eleanor Roberts. It startled me how unfamiliar my own handwriting looked when I wasn't signing permission slips in invisible ink. I said yes to a ceramics class, to clay that stayed under my nails like evidence. I learned the impatience of a wheel and the mercy of a kiln. You're strong-handed, the instructor told me, which is another way to say I have opinions. The first bowl listed to the left, I kept it anyway. I liked that it remembered my fault lines. On Thursdays I met Gina from church for soup and a walk that turned into 2 loops, then 3. We traded stories like recipes, exact amounts optional. She asked about Emma, and I didn't flinch when I said, not much news this week. The truth landed in the air and didn't break either of us. After, I stopped at the library for a new card, the librarian stamping the date like a benediction. I carried home 4 books I didn't owe to anyone. The twist was not in the doing. It was in the noticing. How each small choice revealed the silhouette of someone I had misplaced. In the mirror at the pottery sink, cheeks flushed, hair escaping its clip, I recognized her, the woman who had plans that didn't require explaining. I hadn't outgrown my family. I had outgrown the story where love and erasure were synonyms. I still missed the pictures. I still set 2 mugs sometimes out of habit and rinse one, smiling at myself for the kindness. But the air in my house is different now. It smells like lemons and wet clay and freedom you can't see until you've named it. Message. Sometimes the surest way back to yourself is to take ownership of your days, one small, brave choice at a time, until the life you live answers to your name. The call came on an ordinary Tuesday, right between the kettle's first whistle and the dog across the street announcing the mail. I almost let it go to voicemail. Habit. Armor, but the name on the screen made my hand clumsy. Lily, Mom, she said, breath collecting at the edge of the word. Can we meet? Somewhere quiet. We chose the greenhouse cafe off Maple, the one that smells like damp earth and mint. Sunlight slipped through glass panes and checkered our table. She arrived in a hurry, loose bun, a stain on her sleeve that meant cereal or haste, and sat without ceremony. For a few beats we listened to the drip of irrigation lines, letting the room breathe for us. I've been thinking, she began, eyes on the condensation ring her glass left on the table. About everything I said. About what I asked of you. I folded my hands to keep them from fussing. I've been thinking, too. What followed was not a fight so much as a deposition. Facts laid down beside feelings, each examined in the light. She spoke first, about bills and exhaustion. About the way panic makes any lifeline look like justice. I answered with the softer math, the years I paid in pieces of myself, the way a yes can become a habit that erases you. No verdicts, no gavel. Just two women naming what hurt. I told myself you had time, she said, lifting her gaze. That retirement meant your hours belonged to us. I didn't ask who they belonged to. It's easy to forget our mothers had lives before we needed them, I said. Harder to remember they're allowed to keep them after. Her mouth tilted. Almost a smile, not yet permission. I weaponized need. She admitted, small and plain. Be our nanny or leave. I hear it now the way you must have heard it then. The climax came not as thunder but as a clear, steady rain. We spoke plainly. I told her I would love Emma as a grandmother, not as unpaid staff. I could help on Fridays if asked in advance, bring soup when fevers run their course, sit in tiny chairs at school plays. I would not be the scaffolding her life leaned on by default. She told me she had enrolled Emma in a cooperative daycare, that her husband had asked his boss for flexible hours, that the world did not end when they solved their own problems. Then the twist, gentle, improbable, true. It's better, she said, surprised by her own report. Emma likes her little classroom. I like not resenting you. Your no forced us to grow up. The words found their place in me and settled, like a coin finally reaching the bottom of a well. Around us, a lemon tree shook itself and brightened the air. I was angry because you wouldn't disappear for me, she added, softer now. I think I needed you not to. I reached across the table. She let my hand cover hers, and in that small geography we redrew a border. Not a wall but a fence with a gate and posted hours. We agreed on rhythms she would text before dropping by. I would say when I was free without apology. We laughed, even, at how official it sounded, two women scheduling love like adults who had learned why those lines matter. When we stood to leave, she hugged me first. Tight, quick reel. Friday, she asked. Story time at the library. We could use a grandmother on the carpet. Friday, I said. I'll bring stickers. Walking out into the clean winter light, I felt the old ache loosen its grip. Boundaries hadn't broken us. They had kept us from breaking. Message: when we learn to draw our lines and hold them with care, love doesn't shrink, it deepens. Solid enough to lean on without requiring anyone to disappear. The first true test of our truce came not on a Friday at story time, but on a Sunday when the roast wouldn't cooperate and the family text reawakened with logistics like tumbleweeds. Dinner at ours. 5:30. There were winking emojis and a photo of Emma in socks that didn't match. I felt the old reflex, a readiness that had once been mistaken for love, pull at me like muscle memory. I answered, I'll bring salad and leave by 8. Monday's my class. It was a small sentence, but it carried a new weight, the promise of both showing up and going home. At the table, the air had the hush of a museum after hours. People spoke softer than usual, as if worried a wrong word might set off alarms. Lily's husband, Mark, carved with exaggerated care. Emma pushed peas into a fort around her mashed potatoes. When Lily stood to fetch napkins, she paused. Mom, could you? Her hand hovered toward the sink, toward a high chair clip, toward a dozen small needs I used to meet before anyone could name them. Then she said, almost ceremonially, never mind. I've got it. The words landed without bruising. I sipped water and let the moment pass like weather. After the dishes, when Emma was coaxed into pajamas and we were two women sorting tiny socks by lamplight, the conversation found its spine. There are days, Lily said, when I still want to hand you the calendar and ask you to fill the gaps. She folded a sock into its mate, a small act of mercy. But I can't unknow what I know. That it isn't fair to ask you to erase yourself for us. I can't unknow it either, I said. I can be your mother and Emma's grandmother without being the scaffolding you live on. My love shouldn't be an infrastructure project. I watched her mouth tilt. We were learning to laugh at metaphors that used to make us cry. Mark drifted in, drying his hands. We joined the co-ops Tuesday shift, he offered, as if reporting a lab result. It's doable. Hard, but ours. The pride in his voice was new and right. I heard in it the thing I'd been trying to say for months. Partnership is not a euphemism for dependency. The climax came in a sentence I had practiced and still feared. "I won't be your nanny," I said plainly, palms open on my knees. "Not now, not later, not as the price of belonging. If I say yes, it will be because I can, because I want to. Not because I'm afraid of being shut out." The room didn't flinch. No one stood, no doors slammed. Emma hummed down the hall, half asleep, as if to bless the words. And then, the turn I hadn't dared predict, Lily nodded. "I don't want a mother I have to course," she said. "I want a mother who chooses me. A grandmother Emma can count on because her yes means something." She reached for my hand without instructing it. We sat like that, our fingers threaded, the old seam between us stitched by smaller, stronger stitches. The family thread on my phone woke again, but different now. No requests disguised as updates. No guilt tucked inside a photo. Library Friday. We reserved the carpet square with the sun on it. Emma learned to say, zebra, and it's mostly's. They began to ask instead of assume, to propose instead of demand. And I found myself answering more often than not from panic, but from joy. My calendar filled with things that belonged to me. Clay and trains and soup with Gina. And in the spaces between, there was room for them, too. Here is what we learned. In the quiet that follows a storm, love does not survive on unconditional access. It grows where boundaries are honored, where no one's personhood is the tax for entry. Family is not sacrifice alone. It is respect and understanding braided together, tight enough to hold, loose enough to breathe. Joy came back to me in small, believable ways, the kind that don't announce themselves so much as take a seat beside you and ask if the other chair is taken. I woke one Wednesday to a sky the color of clean linen and realized I didn't owe my morning to anyone. I brewed coffee I actually tasted. Wrote my name in the margin of a paperback, just because I liked the look of it, and left my phone on the counter without its leash of obligation. The silence no longer felt like exile. It felt like a room with good light. I made a list titled Things I Want because I want them. It embarrassed me how long I stared at the blank page. Then the words arrived, shy at first: coastline, clay, piano, Spanish, train windows, soup with friends, a red coat I don't need but will wear anyway. I said yes to a weekend class at the community college. Ceramics too, which implied I'd missed ceramics But the instructor smiled like I'd shown up exactly on time. My first bowl still leaned left, stubborn as memory, but I loved it for remembering me. On Tuesdays I took the early train to the shore with a thermos of tea and a book that kept forgiving me for rereading the best paragraph. I learned the local gulls are thieves. The ocean changes its mind every 30 minutes, and I am happier than I ever admitted with salt on my face and no one asking me what's next. On Thursdays, soup with Gina turned into a standing ritual. We traded recipes for the life after mothering, where you season for your own palate and sit while it simmers. The house took on the habits of a person who lives there on purpose. Zinnias in a chipped pitcher. Clay dust that no longer felt like mess but like evidence. The piano lid stayed open, so did the windows. I bought the ridiculous red coat and wore it to the farmer's market, where the honey seller started saving me the jars that crystallized prettily. My calendar grew dense, not with proof I mattered to other people, but with proof I mattered to myself. And then, the part I hadn't planned for, the more I chose my days, the easier it became to choose my family without losing myself to them. Lily texted photos without requests folded inside them, Emma in a paper crown. Emma asleep on a book like she'd learned by osmosis. Storytime Friday, she'd write. I checked my calendar the way a person checks the weather, not to be controlled by it, but to go out prepared. Yes, until noon, I'd answer and arrive with stickers and leave when the clock said I promised myself something else. The climax was not a single moment but a pattern. Trips booked because I wanted to see a museum with a room of blue things. A beginning Spanish class where my R's refused to roll, but my laugh found its footing. A winter afternoon when I stood in my kitchen and realized the light had shifted in the way old houses do when someone finally opens a door. Here was the twist I hadn't been taught to expect. My relationship with Lily grew steadier precisely because I stopped treating my body like a utility and my time like spare change. She stopped asking me to disappear. I stopped offering. Between us, respect became the hinge everything swung on. I could love her fully and still keep the parts of me that had taken so long to reclaim. The door stayed open, but the threshold was mine. Message sometimes letting go, of roles that erase us, of love that costs our names, is the surest way to build relationships that last not on sacrifice alone, but on mutual respect, chosen freely, again and again. Some mornings I walk my house like a museum I've finally curated. Rooms arranged by intention instead of obligation. The red coat hangs by the door, the piano lid stays open, and a small, lopsided bowl I threw in class holds lemons that shine like small suns. I move through the quiet and feel it answer back. This is what respect sounds like when it stops needing permission, a kettle sighing, pages turning, the soft thud of my own steady heart. Looking backward used to feel like teetering at the edge of a cliff. Now it feels like standing on a dock I built with my own hands. I can name the boards. No to what empties me. Yes to what fills. I can see the water I once fell into, the current of being useful at any cost, and the rope I threw myself, boundaries. Not a punishment, as it turns out, but a bridge. The test came on a gray Wednesday with rain on the forecast and panic in Lily's voice. Mom, the sitter is sick. Daycare's short-staffed. Could you take Emma all day? The old reflex rose, the muscle memory of rescuing. I checked my calendar. Clay at 9, soup with Gina at noon. A matinee ticket in my pocket for a movie that reminded me I had a laugh I hadn't used up yet. I can do the afternoon, I said, soft but solid. 2 to 5. I'll bring stickers. Can you and Mark juggle the morning? A breath on the line, then. We can figure it out. No edge, no weaponized need. Just adults making a plan. I hung up and felt something unclench in my chest. It wasn't that I'd refused. It was that I hadn't disappeared to make it easy. And still, maybe because of that, the plan held. At 2, Emma greeted me with a solemn nod and a plastic zebra. We read 3 books on the rug, the kind with stitched rainbows, and she fell asleep warm against my shoulder, a door I didn't have to hold open forever. When Lily returned, damp-haired and grateful, she glanced at my matinee stub peeking from my pocket. Good, she asked. Good, I said. I meant the film. I meant the day. I meant us. The climax of this new life is quieter than the old ones. There are no ultimatums to dodge, no invisible tests to ace by guessing the answer that costs me most. I don't brace for requests that arrive as edicts. I'm not waiting for the swing of a hammer that says be our nanny or be gone. Love, relieved of its impossible job, has grown sturdier legs. Here's the twist I didn't see coming: freedom has not thinned our ties, it has made them clean. Sunday dinners feel less like auditions and more like soup that knows when to simmer. Lily texts before stopping by. I tell her when I'm free without apologizing for when I'm not. Mark brags about the up schedule like it's a marathon he trained for, which of course it is. Emma has begun to say my name with a question mark and an exclamation point tucked inside it. Nana. As if I am both possibility and promise. I've learned a different choreography: step toward. Step back, hold your own center. I can plan a train trip without running it past anyone's calendar but mine. I can skip a Friday story time because the sun is generous and the shore is calling. And still be invited next week with the sunniest carpet square reserved. The door between us stays open because the threshold is respected. Message freedom doesn't mean walking away. It means loving from a place large enough for everyone to breathe. I did not have to vanish to stay. I had to learn the art of remaining, whole, and let our family learn it too. Love returns in modest ways. A photo of Emma with marker on her chin, a voicemail of her counting to 8 and skipping 6 every time, the soft knock before Lily steps in, because now she always knocks. I feel it from a distance that doesn't hurt, a warm lamp across the room rather than a sun I must orbit. I set 2 mugs when they visit and put 1 back when they don't. Either way, the tea is good. On a mild Saturday, we take sandwiches to the park. Mark spreads a blanket with the focus of a man laying tile. Lily tucks napkins under the corners as if the afternoon might blow away. Emma hands me a fistful of clover as if it were currency. We watch a dog chase a red ball like joy with legs. No one asks me to take Monday morning. No one pretends I am free because they need me to be. The quiet between us is no longer loaded. It has room for birdsong and the squeal of the swings. Mom, Lily says, not quite looking at me. Emma's recital is next month. We'd love for you to come, if you want to. The 4 words land like a key rather than an order. If you want to. I do, I say. I already circled it. I don't add that I circled it in ink I bought just for myself, the blue I keep for plans I'm happy to keep. The climax arrives later, where climaxes often do, midday, mid-sync, in the middle of ordinary. I'm rinsing clay from my wrists after class when my phone buzzes emergency today. Sitter canceled. The old reflex presses against my ribs. I can feel the yes forming out of habit. I check my calendar. Kiln loading at 2, soup with Gina at 5, and read the text again. Slower. There is no demand inside it, only a question. I answer the way a person answers a question she's allowed to consider. I can do 3 to 6. Does that help? Mark replies perfect. We've got the rest. The relief in me is not from saying no, it's from realizing I can say what works and still be loved. In this new rhythm, the twist is simple and astonishing. We have become a family that shares without tallying. Lily sends a video of Emma's first somersault with no second message shaped like a bill. I drop off a pot of chicken soup when fevers circle their house, then go home to my own dinner without waiting for applause. On Sundays they invite, sometimes I come. On some Sundays I don't, because the ocean makes its rare winter blue and calls me by name. The invitation returns the next week anyway. At story time, Emma leans against my shoulder and whispers, zebra like a password. I feel the edge of my life, my classes, my walks, the red coat, the matinees, holding me up from the inside. Lily catches my eye over the rim of a board book. She doesn't mouth thank you. She doesn't have to. Respect has a way of making gratitude visible without making it currency. I used to think love meant surrender. Now I think it means staying, in your own skin, on your own feet, and meeting in the middle with your hands open. We are learning to pass the bowl and not the debt. To offer, not obligate. To ask, not insist. Message. Loving yourself first doesn't shrink the love you have to give, it shapes it. So you can offer it freely, without erasing who you are. The day began with a small, declarative sentence. I choose this. I said it out loud to the kitchen, which answered with the hiss of the kettle and the bright thud of lemons in my crooked bowl. The red coat by the door flashed like a flag I finally understood belonged to me. On the table lay a postcard I'd addressed to myself, not a to-do list, not a reminder for someone else's appointment, but a note that read gallery reception Saturday. Bring the lopsided bowl. Bring yourself. Owning my hours felt less like rebellion than housekeeping. Putting things back where they always should have been. I walked to the community center to pin a flyer for the beginner's wheel class I'd agreed to assist on Saturdays. You'll be wonderful, the director said, handing me a roll of blue tape like a blessing. In the studio, clay hummed under palms that were not mine, and I loved the way people's faces changed when a lump admitted it was becoming a cup. On my way home, my phone rang. Lily. I still feel her name first in my stomach, then in my throat. Mom, she said, the sitter's double, booked next week. Could you take Tuesday? If not, we'll figure it out. I opened my planner. The pages were full of my handwriting. Spanish class, a matinee, a note to buy more honey from the market man who saves the prettiest jars for me. I can take the late afternoon, I said. 3 to 6. I'm loading the kiln in the morning. There was a pause, but not the old kind edged with judgment. That works, she said. Thank you. The click of her relief was gentle, a soft latch finding home. By evening the house had the quiet of something earned. I practiced rolling my R's over a sink of suds until I laughed at myself, then carried the lopsided bowl to the mantel. When I set it down, I felt the click inside, the way a decision, once final, makes a new room in you. The realization came not as a trumpet, but as a scale I could finally play. I do not owe my life to expectation. I can love my daughter and keep my name. I can be Emma's grandmother and still be the woman who buys a train ticket because the ocean forecast is blue. The climax of that thought widened my ribs. No one had to grant me permission, I was the permission. The twist revealed itself in the aftermath. Fullness where fear used to sit. My days no longer hinged on what I should do to be kept in the circle. They hinged on what I chose and, astonishingly, the circle stayed. At dinner on Sunday, Emma pressed a crayon drawing into my hand a stick figure in a red coat with absurdly happy hair. Nana, she announced. Lily smiled and said, she drew you from memory. Pride rose in me cleanly, with no sediment of cost. Later, as I walked home under streetlights that made puddles glow like coins, I counted what I had kept: my classes, my friends, my laughter, the open lid of the piano, the open door to my family. The math balanced for the first time. Messagey. Sometimes the surest way to safeguard love and respect is to claim authorship of your own life, When you hold your center, relationships don't wither. They learn the shape they need to last. Peace didn't arrive like applause. It came like the soft click of a door finding its latch. One evening I stood in my kitchen with the window cracked and the scent of rain lifting from the pavement, and realized the knot under my sternum, the one I'd been carrying through months of ultimatums and explanations, had eased. The house sounded different in the quiet. Kettle sigh, piano lid settling, the small tick of the wall clock keeping time with my breath. I could name the feeling at last. Not victory, not even relieved, equilibrium. The week collected proof in modest moments. Lily texted a photo of Emma in glitter shoes and underneath it, a question without sharp edges recital at 4. Want to come? No pressure. I circled the time in my calendar and wrote, leave by 6, beside it not as a threat but as a promise, to show up, and to go home. At the school auditorium, folding chairs made a field of gray. Tiny bodies took their marks, bows too big for their hands. When Emma stepped forward, her braid listing like a comma, she found me in the second row and tilted her ribs toward the sunlight pooling at my feet. The song was 2 notes too long and perfect anyway. I clapped with everyone else and did not count what I had given up to be there. Afterward we posed with cardboard stars. Glitter fell into the crease of my red coat like confetti determined to become tradition. Come for a quick dinner? Lily asked, cheeks flushed from the kind of pride that softens the voice. There was no pull in it, no hidden ledger. I glanced at the time. An hour, I said, and she nodded like 2 adults who had learned the grammar of each other's yes. At the table, Mark passed bread without commentary. Gratitude has grown quiet in this house. Confident enough to be ordinary. When Emma asked for a story, I read one and then closed the book, even as her palm warmed my sleeve in the spell every grandparent knows. Next time, I whispered, and she nodded against my shoulder as if the ritual of enough was its own kind of love. The shift inside me announced itself again the next afternoon when a text blinked across my screen. Could you take Emma at noon? Sitter's car trouble. I had clay at 1. Soup at 5 and a promise to myself to walk the long way home. The old urge to erase myself began its familiar sprint and then stopped. I can do 3 to 5, I wrote. Does that help? A beat, then yes, we'll cover the rest. No bristling, no bruise. The plan held because we were all holding our own weight. Here's what I learned in the stillness that followed change, is not always a bargain where someone must lose. Sometimes it's a rebalancing. Love sliding back onto its true fulcrum. I didn't bend every time, I didn't need to. The world did not shatter when I kept an hour for myself. Instead, the pieces of us settled into a pattern that felt like mosaic brighter because each tile kept its shape. By the weekend, I could walk my neighborhood without rehearsing arguments. I noticed the neighbor's wisteria had taken to the fence like forgiveness, and a boy on a skateboard steadied a toddler he didn't know. My life felt like that, steadied and being steadied, each of us upright on our own feet. Message. Family love doesn't require endless surrender, it asks for balance, the kind made of respect freely given and space gently kept. We changed, and because we did, what was frayed began to hold. The future didn't open like a gate, it unfolded like a map I'd been carrying, creased and smudged, finally spread across the table. I traced the roads with a forefinger. The train line to the coast, the walk to the market, the path through the park where zinnias lean into August, and realized none of them required permission. I slipped into my red coat, the one that still feels like a declaration, and stepped outside without first checking who might need me more than I need myself. On Tuesdays, the shore. On Thursdays, soup with Gina and a laugh we've learned to keep ready like an umbrella. On Saturdays, the studio, where clay presses its cool insistence into my palms, and the wheel reminds me that centering is an action, not a personality trait. I say my name in beginner's Spanish, trilling the R as far as my mouth allows, and the class applauds the effort rather than the result. At the piano, middle C waits like a constancy I can hold, and I practice scales until the house exhales. Peace arrived not as absence, but as alignment. I could feel it one afternoon on the train, forehead to glass, watching stubbled fields blur into a single green thought. I wasn't checking my phone. I wasn't rehearsing explanations for a no I might need later. I was simply traveling toward a museum with a room full of blue paintings I had decided to see. The quiet in my chest felt earned. The climax revealed itself in a sentence I didn't rehearse. Lily called, calm voice, no edge, and asked if I could take Emma the following week. If not, she added, we'll adjust. I looked at my calendar, spangled now with plans that have my handwriting on them. I can do the morning, I said, but not the afternoon. I'm glazing bowls. There was a pause, then a soft, ordinary, perfect. We'll manage. When the call ended, I stood in my kitchen and realized nothing inside me had braced for consequence. I had chosen, and the world kept turning exactly as it should. Here was the twist I hadn't expected. My love for Lily kept expanding precisely because my life no longer hinged on her approval. We were getting better. Clearer texts, kinder requests, a rhythm that made room for everyone's breath. But my days were not a referendum on whether I was chosen. I chose myself and found I had more to give. At story time, Emma leaned against my shoulder with the gravity of a small planet, and I loved her without Tolly, knowing I would also leave at noon as promised and go throw a crooked bowl into being. Some evenings, I walk home by the long route and count what's stayed and what's changed, the neighbor's wisteria braiding itself into a purple argument I cannot refute, the bookstore window with a handwritten sign that reads "You belong here," the weight of my keys in my pocket, which feels less like ownership than stewardship. I text Lily a photo of a sunset that looks like the inside of a seashell. She sends back Emma's drawing, me in a crimson swoop, hair like exclamation points, and no ask tucked beneath it. Freedom, I'm learning, is not a synonym for solitude. It is a life unshackled from fear, the fear of disappointing, of being benched for refusing, of losing love if you decline the role you were never meant to play. It is the choice to stay connected without dissolving, to show up without vanishing, to be a mother and a grandmother, and, crucially, a woman with tickets and clay under her nails and lemons bright in a bowl she made herself. Message of freedom doesn't leave you alone, it leaves you whole. And from that wholeness, love becomes something steadier. Chosen, shared, and impossible to threaten with expectations that no longer rule the heart. The morning made no announcements. Sunlight slipped over the rim of my crooked bowl, the one I threw on a day I finally believed my hands, and lit the lemons until they looked like small planets I'd been trusted to keep. I shrugged on the red coat without asking the mirror's permission. In the pantry, the paper I'd taped months ago still hung, where grocery lists used to boss me around. I will not be a free nanny. I will love, I will show up, I will contribute, without vanishing. I didn't need the reminder anymore. But I left it there like a cornerstone you don't pull up, just because the house now stands. I walked the neighborhood I'd learned by heart. Wisteria braided itself through the fence with the calm of something that intends to stay. The bookstore window said, "You belong here," in a hand that looked suspiciously like my own. When Lily texted "Park at 4, cake and kites. No pressure," I replied with a simple yes. Until 6, it felt less like drawing a line and more like setting a table. At the park, Emma ran toward me, clutching a plastic zebra like contraband. "Nana," she shouted, punctuation contained inside the name. I knelt, and we touched foreheads the way we do when words are too slow. Lily and Mark were already there, a kite like a bright argument waiting its turn. "You look happy," Lily said, not as proof she'd won, but as recognition I had. I laughed. "I am," I said, and felt the truth ring through me like a tuning fork finding middle C. The afternoon unfolded without negotiation. I tied ribbons. Mark burned the edges of marshmallows with the focus of a man committed to caramelization. Lily passed slices of cake and didn't pass me the calendar. When Emma tired and sagged against my shoulder, I read 2 stories and then closed the book gently, even as a third begged to be read. "Next time," I whispered. She nodded, already practicing the art of enough. The climax arrived, as they often do now, without thunder. I glanced at my watch and stood. "I'm heading out," I said. No apology to sand it down. "Spanish class tomorrow. I need an early night." Lily's hand found my forearm and rested there, not to hold me but to honor the movement. "Thank you for today," she said. "For today. And for teaching me how to keep mine and let you keep yours." On the walk home, the sky became the pale blue of paper you want to write on. I understood, with a steadiness I could lean my whole self against, that the standards I had capitulated to once, be indispensable, be available, be smaller, no longer applied. Freedom and respect weren't trophies I had to defend. They were values I carried like keys, ordinary and essential. The door between us stayed open not because I braced it with my body, but because we finally honored the threshold. Here was the twist I had to live to learn. Family love does not require your erasure. It asks you to be whole, so your yes means yes, your no means no, and the people you love can trust both. In that wholeness, tenderness grows legs, it walks farther than sacrifice ever could. Back in my kitchen, I set the zebra, loaned for safekeeping, beside the lemons in the off-kilter bowl. The piano lid was up, the house waited like a held breath. I pressed a key and then another, notes settling into something that sounded suspiciously like a beginning. Message. To love and be loved, you must love yourself first. Not as a password, but as a practice. When you keep your name, the people who call it learn to mean you, not your usefulness. And that is both an ending and the only beginning that lasts. This is the story of Eleanor Roberts, 58. A woman once haunted by two relentless commands: be available and be indispensable. Her pain wasn't loud, it was the quiet kind, the family thread that went silent, her name erased from a pickup list. The long nights bargaining with guilt. She learned to trade that ache for a red coat, a crooked clay bowl full of lemons, a library carpet square that ends on time, and a note on the pantry door that says, I will love you without vanishing. If Eleanor's journey pulled you in, if you've ever been asked to choose between your worth and your welcome, stay with us. Like, subscribe, and share to support more stories from Telling Story with me. Tell us in the comments, have you ever faced a be our nanny or leave ultimatum? What boundary changed your family for the better? Where are you learning to love without erasing yourself? Your voice might be the courage someone else needs tonight.